believe I have their support because I am an uncompromising Protestant, pledged to uphold the principles of the great Protestant.
To set Catholic against Protestant in this country, rather than give the reforms which would in fact mean that there would be an end to sectarianism.
Catholics march in one direction, Protestants, accompanied by the blare of martial music, march in the other. The clashes remained bloodless during this time, but already the seed of later violence had been sown.
We wanted to do something to show people outside of our town the plight of the young people that live here, when there's really nothing to do in this town. They were the images that people from outside expect to see from our town. We just wanted to do something different. I mean, it wasn't because we wanted to pretend that everything was normal.
There's little room to question what's going on behind the picture, what the violence is all about.
Why Melancholy?
Well, I was horrified actually when the publisher chose it. It's Heaney who was very kind to me over the years, and I asked him for a few words for the blurb for the book, and his line went something like, the photos have they bring back the desolation and terror of the Troubles, but it's the aura of melancholy witness that marks them as the work of Seán Hillen. So it's very kind, and it's true essentially that there is a terrible sadness to them, but so it's both it's a sort of a one of those things. It's a gift and a sadness. I mean, you wouldn't choose to put melancholy in the title of a book, but it does work. It's so true. So I'm grateful for it and happy, and the book is doing very surprisingly very well. So I'm doubly happy.
You've been born in 1961 in Uri, and you're taking the photographs in your teenage years, which means that that happened pretty much at the height of the Troubles in the north. How did this feel at that age? How did this affect you as a teenager, personally?
Well, I grew up surrounded by it. First in this very optimistic period of the 60s, of course, and then in the 70s it exploded, and everyone around me, you know, the people, my school friends and stuff, were drawn into it, and I was drawn into it for a short while and did a bit of stone throwing, got caught, and that cured me. So taking pictures actually in it made me feel that I was doing something useful, and also I found it quite exciting actually. I really enjoyed it, so it was really mostly pleasurable, although partly dangerous.
Civil rights degenerated into battles of the crudest kind in Belfast, Londonderry and other towns. In the sway of battle, Catholics and police slugged it out, each accusing the other of throwing the first stone in an unedifying succession of street fights.
One of your images, one with a teenager in full swing throwing a stone, really burned into my retina, because that teenager could have very well been yourself.
Could have, yes.
Yet instead of a stone, you picked up the camera and you became a witness rather than a direct participant in the conflict. So especially at such a young age, when, I mean, we all know the blood is boiling, why and how did you choose documenting the events instead of being part of the fight?
Well, I was already addicted to photography. I was already taking photographs, but I didn't really have a purpose, for them. As a young teenager, there were cameras in the house, and as soon as I had film developed in a camera, that I was addicted. And so, having got caught throwing stones, I was out of the conflict, and which was better for me. So it was very natural. I had a subject. It was very fortunate in many ways. I had this amazing subject. I had this irresistible urge to do something, and I had a camera. It was natural.
So this impulse of being part of it as I said, to be part of the actual fight, the actual throwing the stone. It kind of disappeared the moment that you took up photography, or how did this happen? Was it a natural type of...
Well, it's the natural instinct, but the wonderful gift of making art, of making pictures, is you're transcending the situation in a way. You're both taking yourself out of it. You can be in it, but you're moving beyond it, and you're communicating. And also, because I'd grown up in this, I'd grown up with an attitude that, well, my father was a trade union man. He used to address other men as brother. And, so we were brought up to respect other people, but we did also feel to be in the conflict. So I wanted to see who these people were. And with the camera, I had a license to go look at them. It was actually very liberating in that way.
Oh, God, visit Ulster at this time. Remove from us the tyrants who would seek to take away our liberty. Be pleased to stir the people of this land. And oh, God, in wrath, remember mercy, and for thy son's sake, give us great victory.
If I thought it would bring justice to the people of this country, I would be quite prepared to give my life.
I think the people within the situation should tell the news about it. Not somebody from the outside coming on, taking their pictures, taking it away and putting whatever caption they choose to put on it. It's the people themselves that should make the news about themselves.
There have been a lot of factions involved in this conflict. The INLA, IRA, UVF, UDA, the RUC, the British Army, just to name a part of them. So I suppose plenty of sides one could choose to fight for with either the fist or the camera. Yet I couldn't help not noticing that you are treating all the involved parties objectively. I mean, people from both communities, either soldiers or fighters, rebels, priests, are all equally depicted in a rather cold and genuine, I would say, photojournalistic fashion. So how did you solve this conundrum in a place and time where, as I said, it was indeed very difficult not to take a side or another?
Well, I did not have a political opinion or position, but I had been brought up to be very broad-minded and to respect other people, But I didn't know who the Protestant people were. We met them in the shops and all of that, but it was, as Heaney said, the place where you say nothing. Whatever you say nothing. So it was an opportunity for me to go and see them. But I had grown up in this funny situation where I watched British television and the British Army would come in and parade around the studio in the children's programme, and the same guys could be in your back garden in full camouflage. I think the whole situation was a kind of political education in... I once said that I discovered at one point that there was an us and a them, and I might be the them. But I had been brought up to kind of respect other people, but I was curious about them as well, The camera let me go and see who these people were. And I also had this feeling that, it was all individual people all caught up in this maelstrom. There was this kind of had this perception that, that we put labels on people and they became things rather than individuals.
So when we were doing Cat in the Brew, we wanted to show people that young people in Derry are ordinary. They're like young people in England.
And I wanted to go and let you see their faces, let you see their eyes. And it was a very exciting and interesting thing for me to go and do it. I had a sort of license to do that.
I mean, looking at the photos, it feels as if you are part of them, but not as different factions. They're all, people of the land. I mean, it's barely any difference. When you look at their faces, they're all treated equally from a photographic perspective.
I mean, if you met these different people, there's one of a black soldier who's kind of sheltering behind an armoured car and taking a moment to close his eyes and get away from it. And if you met him in a bar, he's just another guy, really, And so, in a way, it was interesting to go and see them in the middle of the conflict as individuals. Because, I threw stones at soldiers like him, and he wasn't a man from the north of England, or you know, he wasn't a guy called Barry or something. He was a soldier. So it's part of my own political education, I suppose, my own growth as a human being. You know, this business of going to this business of kind of, I want to know in a lot of this art to kind of put you in their shoes, so that you identify very strongly with these people who are on the other side.
In parallel with your frames depicting the conflicts, the viewer is brought into a different and parallel type of realm of the life in the north. You know, it's the life that continues regardless of the clashes happening around it. We see people attending the mass or going to work to the rubbles, or even coffee shop displaying the price for the soup of the day, and so on and so forth. How does the teenage Seán Hillen remember those years in that part of the life in the north, the normal life, not the life that happened in parallel with the actual conflict?
Well, the funny thing is, as you talk about it in that way, I mean, it definitely, there is this thing that it's amazing about what people can endure and what they will put up with and what they get used to. You know, in the conflict that lasted for 30 years, it became normal. On the other hand, there's another thing, that this is Ireland and people are strange to begin with. People are weird and fascinating and individual. And so there's that aspect to it, that the whole thing was, you know, Ireland is already kind of eccentric and surreal. Normally people are probably everywhere when you engage with them deeply, intimately, you know. So there are all of these things going on. There is the kind of weirdness of reality, the weirdness of the conflict, and the you know, what's on the surface is normal, is actually kind of fascinating and strange in itself, you know. So I said once that I make photos that look like collages and collages that look like photos. And so I did have an eye for the kind of the curious and the slightly extraordinary. And of course I'm shooting film, so every single one really matters. I am counting in my head every single frame. And so I'm after the extraordinary. So on the one hand, it is part of the story, which is the banality or the normality of life in the middle of this 30-year conflict. And there's the other aspect to it, is that it is a gift to an artist, to a photographer, because you have this extraordinary stuff going on in front of you. And I also, you know, intimately knew exactly what was going on, so I could often put myself in a position and wait for things to happen that a Fleet Street photographer wouldn't know. Oh, well, this sequence kind of worked because I'd been a stone thrower. I kind of knew the dynamics of it. And this is an area where the British Army called Agro Corner. It's where Bloody Sunday started as well, actually. And it's where the Bogside was here and the city centre is here. So it's the front line of the rioting. And because I'd been a stone thrower, and when everybody else ran, I instead pulled backwards and took myself a position on the other side of the road. So I waited for this event to happen. And this is a rather bold teenager who's come very close to the front line, and he's looking for stones. And this is a police Land Rover, and they're trying to sneak around the back, hoping to cut him off. But they haven't actually seen each other at this point. And then this is the moment where they do see each other. And they've accelerated. They're trying to try and catch him now, and he's, gosh, gone. This is all in, you know, just 2 or 3 seconds, actually. But because I knew where to be and what was happening, I was able to capture it.
We're all aware of the fact that the Troubles, a mere word, is just a euphemism for an important conflict that spanned over 30 years. You were born and grew up against the backdrop of political violence and social unrest. How did it shape, or how is that still shaping your work as an artist, then and today?
Well, I think again, I was born in, you know, I remember I was addicted to Tomorrow's World, and every week there were new wonders. We were all going to be eating tablets, and we were going to have endless leisure, and you know, plastic was a wonderful new thing. And you know, they brought the first CD into the studio and drove a truck over it and showed us that they would play again. You know, there was this wildly optimistic beginning of consumer society and all of that, and then there was this incredible clash and dreadful conflict that was so intimate. So in a way, I think I was very lucky to have those things going on in my life. It definitely made me an artist, and it gave me a direction to go in, you know. But I'm still in therapy. And like when I was at the Slade, I discovered that a guy had been my best friend when I was 13, had disintegrated himself at the age of 18. And, you know, my neighbours went to prison for shooting at policemen, and, you know, so... there's an enormous psychic aftermath of it. But one of the interesting problems with the psychic aftermath is that it gave people meaning in their lives, the conflict. And so in the aftermath of that, it's kind of what was all this horror and suffering for, which is another very interesting problem, really, you know. I mean, for me as an artist, people used to say to me, well, what does a troubles artist do now, you know? I mean, I've never been stuck for a subject. But there is that aspect to it that, you know, in the Second World War in Britain, they talked about some people had a good war, because they said if you weren't actually being bombed or, being damaged, it was actually a time of heightened sense of living. And there was a lot of drinking in Northern Ireland. There was a lot of drinking and wildlife, you know. So it's humans are very complicated and mysterious, and I think that, you know, there's an aspect of us that kind of enjoys war at the same time, you know, enjoys conflict. It actually brings us meaning, although it wrecks, it destroys us as well.
We're living in times where this particular body of work becomes again very relevant, both from a historical point of view and social and political point of view. Looking back at these photos, you know, you were just telling me before the interview that you are beginning to see them again. How do you feel about looking at them after all these years? And in this particular European political context?
I've been through a number of re-immersions in them now, you know. A lot of them, I mean, printing was far more expensive even than shooting them. So I printed only a small proportion of them, mostly for use in the collage work. And most of the negatives I had never seen beyond holding up the negative. So the first time around, scanning them was an amazing trip into them, and then living with them, because the negatives were so badly damaged, having been 10 years in the carrier bag. I spent a long time looking at them, and that was an extraordinary experience. And then when the History Press decided to publish the book, Melancholy Witness, then I had another 6 months of writing captions for them, which was another re-immersion, you know. And then there was a sort of hiatus, and then showing them again and seeing them over people's shoulders is fascinating. You know, when the National Library acquired them, I really didn't think anybody was going to see them. I wanted to exhibit them, take the opportunity to exhibit them, and frankly, I thought that was going to be it. And instead of which 300 to 400 people a day came to see them. Because I think in the Republic of Ireland, the conflict was on people's tea time news every night, and they had very complicated emotional feelings about it, of wanting to be involved, being repelled by it. So in a way, the photos are a way into it for people, and because they are essentially very humane, I think a lot of them are almost portraits, that they do really, they let you engage very much in that moment, and all of these suppressed feelings come out. And so I think I've had that journey as well myself, you know.
Seán, thank you, and all the best with your work.
Thanks a million. Thanks. It's been a pleasure.